I don't want to be doing this stream. You don't want me doing... Oh, yes, you do. You've been asking. People are already asking me, do I have any thoughts on the Rings of Power? Well, a little few. Only the ones that I can, of course, glean from reading the Dark Herald's reviews on Archaven and averting my eyes when the trailers go past and noticing the endless comments that are showing up. Okay, so I guess I have... from the social media, from the reviews, from the trailers that I seem not to have been able to avoid, a few opinions, which I will share with you tonight on the Mosaic Arc. Do we have to, we have to do this one, don't we? Do we really have to do this one?
We do.
Oh, no. I don't want to. Do you want to? Do you want to talk about, I don't know, a show you haven't seen? Have you been watching yet?
No. I've been told not to hate watch. We're all boycotting it. However, I did see snippets passing somebody else's device as they were watching it.
Well, I don't want.
So I saw it by osmosis.
Yeah, it's
watching.
It's clearly one of those events, right? We can't miss it because clearly it's one of those. And the thing is, I actually like Amazon Prime. I mean, I watch a lot of videos there, so yes. I don't want to support something that I'm probably gonna be really mad about if I watch. But on the other hand, I'm kind of supposed to know about Tolkien stuff, but is it actually Tolkien? I'm not sure.
Is it?
Can it be Tolkien if, as we know from the Dark Herald's excellent reviews, and I can say this now having met said Herald in person at BaseCon this past weekend, so I know he's a real person. He's watching so we don't have to, and the kinds of things that he's noticing, being a true Tolkien fan and knowing the Legendarium and knowing things like, whoa, guess what? Galadriel cannot go to Valinor during the Second Age. Will not happen. Cannot happen. Is out. I mean, so far out of the canon that it's a completely different story. So maybe we don't have to watch because it's not actually Tolkien's story.
Okay, so they've completely wrecked the narrative then. So it's not just a rumor.
Well, I'm relying on the Dark Herald's tale here, but what I can tell, in fact, from the trailers, if in fact she goes to Valinor during the Second Age, this is already outside canon, and we can simply ignore it as not part of Tolkien's vision. Shall I narrate exactly why that is, just to get it out of the way?
I think you should. I think we need the lore.
Oh, okay. So the lore. And I will say, those watching on Unauthorized, I did a whole episode on Galadriel. It's like episode 37, The White Lady. Although, after I read Holly Ordway's book on Tolkien's sources, medieval and modern, I had to, or modern sources, I had to revise, and I think I talk about that in one of later episodes, how Galadriel's probably modeled not just on the Virgin Mary, which is what Tolkien said in his letters. He was writing to one of his Catholic friends, so yeah, he's going to say, yes, she's modeled on Our Lady. He probably also is modeling on her on the demonic she of Trider Haggard's African story. So your mileage may vary. But she's clearly this white lady who's lived for a very long time. And she, in Rider Haggard's story, the protagonist, Aisha, has managed to murder her lover and is waiting for him to be reincarnated and come back. I don't know whether Galadriel's like that or not. However, I have some notes so that I don't mess up the lore, right? In the Silmarillion, it's very clearly given that Galadriel is the daughter of Finarfin and the sister of Finrod Felagund. Now, Dark Herald goes into some details about how and when Morgoth manages to kill Finrod. That doesn't work in the story, but what the Rings of Power may have slightly accurate is that Galadriel is in fact one of the leaders of the rebellion against the Valar in the First Age. She and her brother follow Feanor back into Middle-earth, away from the Blessed Realm. Are we getting all this?
Yes.
Okay. When Morgoth, with the help of Ungoliant, kills the trees in order to steal the Silmarils. Again, Dark Herald has given some details about how the Silmarils don't really show up in the Rings of Power because, oh, right, they didn't have the rights to the Silmarillion. All they have are the rights to the appendices in the Lord of the Rings, in which a précis of some of this First Age narrative appears. And so, because they don't have the rights to the actual Silmarillion, maybe that we can, well, no, we can't give them a pass for not following the canon, because they clearly want to be making something that refers to the canon, but they can't because they don't have the rights to it. Okay, whatever. Mm-hmm. So
contract law strikes again.
Yes, well, it makes you wonder. It's like, why not just do something with elves? I mean, you got Dungeons and Dragons, you got elves, you got orcs, you got trolls, you got dwarves. There is a question why we particularly needed this to be the Lord of the Rings. In other words, they're just sort of coasting off of what they hope is the attention that this will get. But surely it's Amazon, it's elves, it's going to be enough. Why do we need Galadriel? Anyway, so she is one of the leaders of the rebellion against the Valar. She goes with Feanor, although Tolkien makes sure, I think he's backtracking in his letters, like the last letter in the collection, he makes sure to say, at no point was Galadriel stained with what kind of stain would she have? She had committed no evil deeds, which this is writing in August 1973. And I think a lot of what happens in Tolkien's letters is his fans start asking him questions about the backstory, and he realizes he hasn't really made it totally clear, even in his own mind, because why would you? He's writing a story that has its own resonances. For example, with the thing about, oh, it's really Galadriel is really the Virgin Mary. No, it's actually she, which he never said, but it really is if you look at what Rider Haggard describes Aisha. In the Silmarillion itself, Galadriel clearly goes against the Valar to go back to Middle-earth. I mean, that in itself should be evil enough. It's evil enough for her to get banned by Mandos about coming back. But she committed no evil deed. She was an enemy of Feanor. This is a letter to Lord Halsbury in August 1973. She did not reach Middle-earth with the other Noldor, but independently. Okay, Tolkien himself is going against his own canon at certain points, I think, because he likes his characters. He doesn't want to have them be disliked. And I think that is sort of against his own legendarium, because he had actually said in the Silmarillion, this is when she didn't swear any oaths, and therefore she's not bound by the same kind of oath-taking that Feanor is, but no oaths she swore, but the words of Feanor concerning Middle-earth had kindled in her heart, for she yearned to see the wide, unguarded lands, and to rule there a realm at her own will. Now, if you know anything about Tolkien, you know at her own will is going to be problematic. So he kind of sets her up, and then later says, oh no, she didn't do anything. She spends time in Doriath, And this I think I didn't notice the Dark Herald pointing this out, but it's going to be a real problem in Rings of Power if like she has some kind of romantic fling with Sauron, because of course it's set up because he's the bad boy and he's kind of handsome, and who knows, she's married. and then specifically she's married to Celeborn of Doriath in the First Age. So again, throughout the Second Age, there is zero way she's going to be the character that she appears to be already in the first 3 episodes of the Rings of Power, which is unmarried or unencumbered, or not really mentioning the fact that she's married to Celeborn. She also, go ahead.
Strong, independent female.
Strong, independent female. Very curiously. Okay, so that in his letters, Tolkien did, you realize I did do my research so that we could get this part out of the way. He explains in a letter, this is a letter from, it's a long letter. This is one of those that the fan, Mr. Rang, drafts her letter to Mr. Rang, August 1967. He would get these letters from his fans, and then he'd try to answer all the questions. And with this one, he explains that Galadriel, specifically after Arendelle goes and pleads with the Valar for help against Morgoth, so this is the end of the First Age, Galadriel is one of the few of the exiles who is not allowed to return. So in the Rings of Power, I suppose she's not in Valinor, this is why. The exiles were allowed to return, save for a few chief actors in the rebellion, of whom at the time of The Lord of the Rings, only Galadriel remained. And he makes a footnote to himself that this is actually in The Lord of the Rings in her lament in Lorien, because she believed at that point that this in the Fellowship, that she's going to be exiled forever, because she doesn't think that she's going to be able to go back. He softens this a little bit a little later. By January 1971, a letter to Miss Ruth Austin, who has been clearly talking to him about Galadriel. And he says to her, "I was particularly interested in your remarks about Galadriel. I think it is true that I owe much of this character to Christian and Catholic teaching and imagination about Mary." Again, he so wants her to be like Mary. But actually, Galadriel was a penitent. In her youth, a leader in the rebellion against the Valar, the angelic guardians, at the end of the First Age, she proudly refused forgiveness or permission to return. She was pardoned because of her resistance to the final and overwhelming temptation to take the ring for herself. And that's the canon that the Dark Herald refers to in his first review on Archaven, which you all should read after I link it. That if the Rings of Power send her to Valinor at all, which they clearly have already in the first episode, because otherwise the Dark Herald wouldn't be talking about it, she can't go back. The entire premise of her character in the Fellowship of the Ring and then in the Return of the King and following is she is willingly still in Middle-earth and has not been able to return. So anything that you plot for her being able to go back to Valinor and rouse troops or something like that is already out of canon.
So she's a penitent.
Yes.
Okay. So why have they done this?
Well,
apart from the obvious that it's going to make them money, or it might not, depending.
Well, how is it going to make them money? I think that's the interesting problem, that they are taking over a story property. And I've already, I can't remember in what context I've said this. Was it when we were talking? I realize I've been on camera too much and I'm forgetting when I've said things. I may have said, I'm not overly bothered by this idea of appropriation of stories. I mean, that we can't get too wound up about, because all fan fiction is constantly doing that. You can say I would do better at maintaining the characters that this particular author has created, but for example, in the Arthurian legends, I mean, there's lots of different variants on even Arthur and Lancelot and Guinevere, the main characters. I don't think it's a crime against storytelling as such to transform them in your own to your own liking. So that isn't my problem, if anybody's wondering. But I do I'm having problems with some other things, which is making me want to resist helping Amazon make any money off of this particular version of the story.
Because I've been having arguments with a few people the last couple of days about appropriating stories.
Oh, yeah?
In particular the remake of The Little Mermaid.
Oh, that's okay. Tell us about that one.
I made a lot of I made a lot of noise about the appropriation of stories in general by Disney.
Do you think appropriation is actually a thing? Is that a meaningful problem?
No.
Uh-oh. we just lost our audience. Please tell us.
Well, in this particular discussion, it was about whether or not Disney's rendition of The Little Mermaid was sacred and untouchable and could never be done again. And I argued that Disney is doing what it's always done, which is take stories from other cultures and fashion them and Disneyfy them.
Which Tolkien was worried about. He didn't want his own dwarves Disneyfied.
Yes. But I think that has a lot more to do with the person who is doing the storytelling or who is doing the remake. Because in this sense, the horror of the European fairy tale was taken out for the most part in the Disneyfication process, and also possibly the morality behind the morality tale. So Mindy's gonna kill me, but my argument is that the American Disney storytelling machine is doing what it's always done, which is just remaking other people's stories. And I was trying to ask everybody, what exactly is the American story? Because The Little Mermaid isn't, it's Danish. And so a couple of people put their hands up and everyone said, okay, so the Disney princess that is American, she is Pocahontas. I said, yes, okay. So even with that narrative, they've taken from something that happened and still changed it. So this process of taking something and changing it is happening all the time. So it doesn't really bother me that much, but I know everyone's very, very upset by the remaking process.
I mean, we do obviously have some questions about the Galadriel that we've seen in the trailers.
Yes.
But is it the appropriation as such? I mean, taking a story and retelling it and making it more in the argument that one wants to make of the story. Are we at that level of, oh my gosh, it was wrong for Amazon to buy this property at all?
Well, they've changed something which people perceive as sacred.
Well, I mean, I'm happy that stories seem sacred. I mean, really, who changes stories and rewrites them and, I don't know, makes the bad guy into the good guy? Who would do that? Tim Rice and what's a Jesus Christ Superstar? It kind of happens a lot. Yes. Yes.
It does.
Okay. So are we? Is it the appropriation as such that's the problem?
That's a great question. It doesn't seem to be the problem. The problem is the changing of the meaning behind the story.
Well, okay. In this case, the thing is, I'm not even sure I mind the changing of the meaning behind the story. I'm mad about bad storytelling. Just full stop. And
just
therefore
making trash.
Yeah, if they were making and that is what I'd actually like to mull over. Exactly, they are changing the story it's already feeling, at least it's upset, some reviewers. It's certainly upset a lot of the Rotten Tomatoes fans. I've seen, review. There was a First Things review that was saying, oh, but it's tapping into the transcendental, and therefore, the Rings of Power is probably actually, doing what Tolkien would have wanted to do with his stories. I think in the long run, worrying about whether we're doing what Tolkien would have wanted to do with his stories is irrelevant.
Okay. So why is this upsetting?
Why is this upsetting to me?
Mm-hmm.
Is it upsetting
to the Tolkien fans? Why has this particular telling upset everybody, especially with Galadriel? What have they done?
The thing I've seen most people talking about is not Galadriel, but the casting of different hued people into the character groups that may or may not have been tawny skinned in the story, which again I consider curious and kind of irrelevant in the concerns that people are having. I mean, in the sense that it's sort of I almost that it's like that the casting was designed to signal one thing, which people are obviously picking up on and saying, oh, well, we're meant to worry about this being a story that was meant to be set in this period in English prehistory that is mythological and yet inaccessible through some kind of imaginative exercise, and therefore it's as nonsensical as putting Ralph Fiennes in a movie about an African kingdom or something. Like, okay, that's you could say that, but again, I think people can get distracted with the shiny and miss the thing that is actually going on in the retelling.
So they're worrying about aesthetic changes instead of the deeper change, which isn't Hugh.
Which isn't
Galadriel's case.
Well, no, I can show people what she looks like. Here she is in her appearance in the well, at least in some of the trailers, and she has a very metallic costume. Which is the one thing that I'm thinking about. It's like, it seems to me that the entire point of this Amazon series is to put Galadriel in armor. As far as I can tell, clearly they put this in the early release photography. So we need to show Galadriel in armor. That's what I'm curious about. That's what I really wonder what's up about.
Which is a much bigger change than changing the skin tones of some hobbits or pre-hobbits, right? This is a fundamental change in the character.
Well, so again, I'm not entirely sure, because she does go with Fëanor and the others, and you can see Tolkien hedging one way and the other about how much she participates in. He's quite insistent that she never kills anybody. She had never done any evil deed. Oh no, he says she'd never done any evil deed. It's not clear whether she ever killed anybody. It's certainly in the realm of possibility. He has elf women fighting at various times in his stories, and he later in his meditations on the roles of the elf men and women says the women would fight when necessary. So it's not like he never imagined his characters having that kind of role.
Okay. So if the elves have been fighting, if elf ladies have been fighting, why is this seen as so subversive to have Galadriel in armor?
Well, indeed. I think one of the things that it is a production company called Amazon. They're going to make women warriors. It's like with the different hued, hobbits. Exactly why, and this is actually where I'm getting at, right? Exactly why do they think that this is going to be such a show stealer? Look, she's in armor. I say this as a fencer. She's, why would you carry your sword on your back like that? I never understand that. You cannot draw from that position. I mean, the sort of ways in which fantasy fighters are supposed to be wielding these weapons. And one, that sword, I mean, I've done little bit of sword practice with broadswords in like the martial arts, historic martial arts training. They're heavy. Mm-hmm. This woman, this girlie that's in this picture, the actress there's no way she's wielding that sword. I doubt it. Unless it's some kind of magic elf metal or dwarvish, maybe it's mithril, who knows. It's magically lighter than, I don't know, my sting here.
They haven't made a buff Galadriel.
No, they forgot to Hulk her up. They do and this is actually, it's like the thing they need most is for Galadriel to be the lead character in battling against Sauron. Now, again, within Tolkien's Legendarium, there is a female character who literally does that, which they don't have the rights to make. It's literally the female character elf modeled after Tolkien's own wife. Mm-hmm. So if they had the rights to Silmarillion, I don't know whether they'd be putting Luthien in armor or not. She actually has a better way of dealing with Sauron, because it's actually Morgoth. I mean, with Sauron too, she manages to outwit him, and then she manages to overcome Morgoth by dancing for him and putting him to sleep. And she also has the help of a dog, the hound of heaven that is helping her, in fact. So Tolkien's perfectly capable of writing, shall we say the word, strong female characters. Yes. Who, yes. Éowyn literally kills the dragon, the wraith, the mount, the rider. I mean, it's like I did an episode on that one, and did I do an episode on that one yet? I don't know. That always comes up in my class, right? Éowyn in the battle before Gondor is the only character in the Lord of the Rings to kill a dragon. I mean, Bard gets to do it in The Hobbit, but in the Lord of the Rings, Éowyn is the one that literally kills the dragon. Merry stabs the ringwraith, but she kills its mount. So
he's not opposed to depicting warrior women.
Apparently not. I mean, this is what's so funny about the whole thing. It's like we've got to make, as we say, a woke Lord of the Rings, because Amazon certainly can't, simply make Tolkien's story and give the characters all of the restrictions that they are actually laboring under, like Galadriel's too proud to be allowed to return to Valinor, because guess what? She, stubbornly stood out in her rebellion against the Valar and wanted to keep her own kingdom. It's interesting that they have to meddle with the story in the first place, because Tolkien was marvelously capable of writing these valiant women in his stories.
So what's the difference between Tolkien's vision of a valiant woman versus Amazon's vision? I think this is the key here. The difference between the two, because obviously no one's angry that Éowyn is riding on her horse and slaying dragons, but this Galadriel in armor seems to be very irritating kind of heresy of Tolkien's vision of what valiant women look like.
Well, I'm irritated. I'm irritated, but not because it's sort of, they have to put her in armor because they think it's edgy. And I'm sorry to tell you, Jeff Bezos and company, it's less edgy than you think it is, or maybe it's edgy in a way that you don't it's like it's so funny, because we have Tolkien over and over and over again insisting that Galadriel is modeled on the Virgin Mary, which everybody knows that the Virgin Mary is a complete wimp, right? Who why would you
not if they've been spending any time with you?
Well, okay, that's kind of
all of 5 minutes.
That's our own spoiler alert, right? You know what, Our Lady does. Terrible as the ordered ranks of an army, quote the Song of Songs, in front of, oh, I don't know, Constantinople. Oh, I don't know, several times. Right? That she is in fact considered the defender of the city, and the Constantinopolitans will march around the walls of the city carrying her icon, expecting her to drive back the Avars and the Arabs and who knows who else. Yeah, okay, so that, problem, possibly. 1571, pray the rosary, get the, drive off the Ottoman Turks. Could it be that Tolkien, in his imagining Galadriel as a Virgin Mary character, already had a warrior image in mind? He doesn't say.
But he had plenty of inspiration, if it was the case. Well, the Theotokos is not seen as a helpless in Christendom, correct?
Not at all. Not at all. I'm wondering. So I think I managed not to log into the chat in the right way, but it's like, oh look, Casey's already figured it out. But if I read that out loud, then you guys won't say. Galadriel, so Casey asks, is Galadriel meant to look like dun 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 Joan of Arc? Could it be? Well, I find that their armor looks very, very similar. The armor that the producer, the costumers in Rings of Power have put Galadriel in for whatever scene that's in the trailer, is strikingly similar to the one medieval portrait that we have of Joan of Arc in her armor. What do we make of that?
So many things.
What do you make of it now that I've led you down this little path here? I put the same image in the cover to the video, so you all have seen it already if you've looked at it. But put these two side to side. Put Joan of Arc and Galadriel side to side in their armor, and how edgy and woke are you feeling now? I mean, I know what Amazon is trying to do. I think it's trying to appeal to who knows what. Is it a non-Christian audience? Is it a Christian audience? Maybe the first things review is secretly, is in fact on the right track, and the Amazon is secretly making a Christian series. Now, wouldn't that be delightful?
Amazon secretly plots to retake Constantinople.
Amazon secretly plots.
That would be pretty based. Unfortunately, I don't think Jeff Bezos is committed to Christendom that much.
Could it get him in spite of himself? I mean, that would be quite ironic.
Yes, that happens.
Wouldn't that be lovely? Saying, okay, so
the stones cry out.
The stones cry out. Well, there is the reality that many people read Tolkien. I mean, Catholics read him and say, oh, it's all Catholic. Catholics that wrote to him kept saying, oh, I see the Virgin Mary in your Lady Galadriel. And he's like, oh, yes, of course she is. But she's, of course, a penitent. And then non-Catholics or non-Christians read the Lord of the Rings and say, oh, phooey. In fact, and this was in the little talk that I gave at BaseCon this weekend that the Dark Herald actually heard, so we'll see whether this shows up in any of his reflections, that I was asked by the College Fix to reflect on some titles from the recent Oxenmoot conference. It was held a week or so ago in Oxford about Tolkien, and one of them, Professor Robin Reed, was saying the alt-right religious appropriation of Tolkien, which is pretty hilarious. It's like the alt-right religious appropriation. What could she possibly mean? We don't have enough women in armor in the religious right? Wait, which side's Joan of Arc on? Is she Christian?
Christian and very monarchist.
And very, clearly. Very monarchist, indeed.
Her entire mission was to restore France under the direct rule of a French Catholic king. I mean, it doesn't get more right wing than that, does it?
Well, I've really lost track of which wing is which anymore, right? They as we say, they're two wings of the same bird, whichever bird that is. Yeah. But yes, okay. So Joan of Arc has the prestige of being burned as a witch by the English, or technically by the Burgundians, who were in league with the English at this point, because the Burgundians are rebellious against the King of France, who Joan has helped get anoint but not crowned, because the English still have possession of the crown, or the Burgundians do, I'm not sure. But you're right, Joan's whole point is to help restore Charles VII to his rightful place as the King of France. And it's for that reason that she dons armor, in order to help him lift the siege of Orleans, among other things.
Yes. But she's not donning armor as a direct combatant. This is Joan of Arc. Well, from my memory of the saint's life, she was instructed to cross-dress for a different reason than to actually go out and kill Englishmen.
It is true that in her rehabilitation trial, in the trial for heresy, which is what she was technically tried for, they press her on things like where did the sword come from and so forth. In a rehabilitation trial, when she's dead, her men testified to the fact that, you know, she was with them in the field, in the military field, and commanded them, but she's not. And she did bear the sword into battle, but she didn't kill anybody, as far as anybody remembered.
Yes.
So it's more symbolic.
So it was a kind of holy theatrics of seeing a young peasant girl leading an army dressed as a soldier, as a kind of way of inspiring the men to keep going, but not necessarily as an inversion of her virtue, in the sense that she wasn't actually inverted and transformed into a fake man and expected to do. I don't know if this is making any sense, but, you know, she wasn't expected to go to the front lines and slay a foreign army and just behave as a combat soldier. It was a different calling in that sense.
Sort of. I mean, so what we know from the reviews is that Galadriel does manage to kill a cave troll fairly early on. Very, very expeditiously. We don't know that Joan of Arc had to kill any cave trolls. I think unlikely. It does seem that Joan was seen in the sort of forefront of battle. I mean, she's there as you say, symbolically. A great deal was made in her trial by the Burgundians, that she had been given women's clothes to wear in prison and then changed back into her men's clothes, and they press on it, and it's one of these, you know, perennial mysteries in the scholarship discussion, exactly what was the problem with her wearing men's clothes, what was so and not just the armor, but just, you know, men's clothes as such, not a dress. What was it that was so problematic? And because, you know, she's being tried basically as an enemy of the, not an enemy of the state, a threat to the state, to the Burgundians and to the English. I'm never sure why they're bringing it up, because they're trying desperately to figure out some way to get her on something, and the clothing just seems to be the thing that she's most stubborn about.
So it's like trialing someone over a parking ticket.
Maybe, or it was actually that problematic and transgressive in the period, and they were that bothered. It's kind of hard to say. What is clear, though, from her rehabilitation, when Charles is now king and he's kind of embarrassed not to have supported her better, that her men followed her willingly. And a number of them testified that she was a good commander, and that she kept good discipline in the field, and that they are there. I mean, to think of her as general, or just as a commander, and Charles, in the midst of the the time when she's fighting does ennoble her. In the image of her in armor, she's shown with a banner, and one of the things that came up at the trial is the first trial is, oh, she was captured because she was wearing a golden cape. Don't wear capes if you're a superhero. That she was pulled back.
It always ends badly with capes.
It always ends badly with capes. That she had that. She was a peasant, born as a peasant, but she had that right to wear that cloth of gold because she had been ennobled by Charles. He then withdrew support from her and didn't send her reinforcements when she was in behind enemy lines and things like that. So Charles is not actually doing the great job at recognizing her, spiritual support while she's alive. And it is interesting when she's rehabilitated that the men, so again, it's like there's this fantasy version of, history that claims, one will say these various fantasy versions of history that we're now digging down to the root of why I think Amazon's on the wrong track. If what it wants to do is like challenge the dominant narrative of any way. One, we have the Virgin Mary understood throughout the Middle Ages as a great battle commander in the sense of, there's a line in the Song of Songs that's used to describe her as terrible as the ordered ranks of the army. And she is recognized as leading armies, particularly in defensive cities like Constantinople and Chartres. So that's not the problem that we are told it's supposed to be. Neither in Joan's rehabilitation is it at all clear that it was the problem that the English and the Burgundians wanted to make it, that she was leading these soldiers. They don't seem to have been as bothered by it. I mean, there's plenty of women in the Middle Ages that are recognized as lords, that they're widows and hold there are no queens, except for one in the English tradition, the Empress Matilda, who actually, commands armies against her cousin Stephen when they're in competition for the succession in the 12th century. So there's a lot of fantasy version of like what was permitted women in the past, like whether they go into battle, whether they be commanders, whether they be recognized as leaders.
So this is interesting because a lot of people, excuse me, I'm going to move my jumper. A lot of people are incensed because they think what's going on now is the wokeists are trying to smash the patriarchy with Tolkien.
Ooh.
So, and also this kind of masculinization or whatever, like making feminine characters more manly and giving them more traditionally masculine roles, like leading armies. But from what you're saying, this was old Europe, medieval Europe had much more fluidity in terms of what women were able to do than what we're told is generally their traditional place.
Yes.
Interesting.
Well, certainly so Galadriel's a fictional character. We agree on this. Yes. and therefore she is in, heroically complicated scenarios, fighting cave trolls and having to come up against, in fact, Satan's lieutenant, Sauron, because Morgoth is Satan. That she therefore, she's battling at the level of, the supernatural. She's an elf, and she's having to go up against Sauron, who is in effect an angel, or a lower angel. He's the same level angel as Gandalf is. So he's an incarnate angel in the Second Age, but he's still angelic. So she's expected to work in this kind of, it's a supernatural realm. Therefore, even Galadriel's not meant to be an ordinary human being.
No, but the idea in this fictional realm is coming from Tolkien's understanding of the medieval and old Europe and old European culture. So that's kind of giving me the link of thinking, okay, so if he as the European scholar that he was is looking at what women were doing in the old world in Europe during that time, old Christian Europe, he's not uncomfortable with putting women in these more warrior-like roles. So I'm still stuck on exactly what it is about Galadriel and armor that is irritating us.
Well, I would say nothing except for the pretense that it's supposed to be, so edgy.
Okay.
Right? I mean,
Okay.
that's to me, it's like we know this is like when they make the black hobbits and the black elf, and this is meant to get absolutely everybody polarized in their appreciation. I mean,
Yes.
and effectively it's working in academia insofar as my colleague Professor Reed at least gave a talk with that title, right? The alt-right religious appropriation of Tolkien. Considering that, as far as what we know, the alt and the right and the religious that are interested in stories right now are Christian. So does she mean Christian? I don't know, because A, I don't have the talk, and B, these terms keep getting elided constantly, right? So are we talking about white? Oh, we're going to put black hobbits in. That'll teach them. that'll teach you to be really upset about the loss of your culture. And it's like, okay, which culture are we talking about?
Oh, thank you. I was ranting about this 2 days ago regarding Black Ariel. I've asked everybody to exactly explain to me what the issue is with the skin tone changes in the Disney characters. So far, no one has been able to say anything to me which makes any sense, because I've asked everybody to tell me why, if you're an American corporation and you're stealing stories from Europeans, because you're pirates, you pirate
Disney pirates,
everybody else, yeah.
Yep.
So you're taking stories from other cultures, you're Disneyfying them, you're Americanizing them. Okay, so that's the process. Everyone understands.
What is it about Robin Hood and American accents, right?
Oh yeah. Oh, except for did Russell Crowe Robin Hood do an American accent? I forget.
No, maybe they have English accent. Which is it? But no, Kevin Costner's Robin Hood is straight up American accent.
I have never been a Kevin Costner fan.
That one is worth it for the Alan Rickman Sheriff of Nottingham.
Okay, all right. Well, Alan Rickman is always quality, though. No, I was never into Costner, but yeah, you've got this American corporation that's Americanizing, Disneyfying all of these foreign stories, and then making them American. So really, whatever they're doing to them, it's already changing and turning it into an American thing. And then I'm asking everyone, well, okay, so if you're making it American, well, who's an American? This is where I get in trouble.
Yeah.
Because everyone's saying, okay, well, it's an American, you're an American once you've got an American passport. Okay. So that means anybody within the borders of America that has an American passport is an American, which means they can be the Little Mermaid. That was my logic. For me, it was that simple. If it's a case of arguing over the provocative propaganda of having to change an old version of something,
right,
it's a different conversation. But in terms of the basics of story retelling, I couldn't really see a problem with this, because in my mind, I'm looking at it thinking, oh, so you've just used an American to make another American rendition of a foreign story. The process is the same, right, in my mind.
Well, I go back to, why does it irk? Okay, so the problem I have, or I do actually have problems with the Amazon Rings of Power, but I'm trying to get to
let it out.
It's boring is what I'm seeing, right? It's horrible that they're making it boring, and that this kind of worrying about whether or not people are going to be offended because they see particular races or sexes cast as goodies or baddies. I mean, that it's like, why are you only able to see what is it about? And I think this came up in your Little Mermaid discussion. It's like, well, I want to be the Little Mermaid, and so you can't make her look like that. And that, to me, it's like, why do you need, why, if you're watching, I do agree with this, why, if you're watching a story that's clearly written to be a mythology for England, do you feel like you need to see the whole world in it? Well, I mean, the obviously the straight up answer is because Commonwealth. Yes. and we're trying to make Commonwealth friendly stories. Well, okay, that has its place, and Tolkien actually probably wouldn't have been bothered by that. I think the kinds of questions, like I'd say, Tolkien was born in South Africa. He had a black nurse when he was little, and there's a picture that his mother decorated as a Christmas card that has their family and the nurse there, and she's clearly dark skinned. So I don't think Tolkien would have actually been as bothered as some people are premising we ought to be by this part of the appropriation. It's the cloying, what is it, sanctimony of, yes, we are going to improve on the way in which you've been portraying these stories by doing this, that, or the other adjustment, including doing something like making sure that Galadriel is the lead warrior in the story, and that we are now supposed to, as, I don't know, women, feel more, empowered by seeing Galadriel in armor than when we saw her in a beautiful dress. I mean, I'd like to wear a beautiful dress, frankly.
They're trying to satisfy this desire in women now to be seen as commanders.
Now we might start having some problems. What is it that we're worried about?
We, as in everybody, Westerners.
Oh no, you and me.
And I. Oh, okay.
Do we plan these at all before we go on camera? Sometimes yes, sometimes thinking, no.
Yeah, how much do we want to hate on the crusade against masculine heroism?
Oh, much.
I don't know.
Much we do. Much.
I'll go there.
We want to hate on this crusade of masculine heroinism. Masculine. What is it? What do we want to hate on?
Did you just bended the gender then?
I'll bend these genders. You know who else gender bended?
Joan of Arc. What
are we going to do with that?
Well, women are thirsty to be commanding.
They are. It was said so. Chaucer figured that out in The Wife of Bath. So what Casey is saying. Oh, so Mel, we've got. We've got Casey and Mel as our valiant commentators. Casey's like, Costner was horrible as Robin Hood. Yes, well. And Mel says Christendom cures boredom. Exactly. We're trying to get there. But let's get there.
It does. Women are very, very thirsty to be the commanders of this civilization. I hate it. I'm very tired of it. Which people might find ironic considering my personality, but the disconnect between old Christendom and our world now maybe is why people can't see why that isn't a contradiction. The women now are striving to do something that the men in the old world were called to do, which was go on the hero's journey and to go on their adventure through the underworld to emerge heroic. So I think this is where it's coming from, is that women are trying to replace men in that masculine hero's journey and sort of want to don the armor of heroism without necessarily understanding the process that goes into becoming the hero. That's my take. I think this is why it's irritating me. Because the armor that Joan of Arc wore, she had earned through her valor, through her virtue, through her submission and obedience to God, and through her selfless sacrifice and duty to her nation and God and country and all of that kind of stuff, where the women now that want to wear armor are not willing to sacrifice. They are not willing to take on the duty that would require them to earn that armor and that golden cape. They want to be superheroes without the sacrifice. So I think this is what's really annoying me about it.
What's interesting is that therefore they don't even want to be men in that version of things. If we have, I have a map of the. Let's see. Well, here's the usual. Take Joan of Arc. There are various variants of the hero's journey out there, and I mean, famously, what George Lucas was working on Star Wars and found out, oh my gosh, I'm writing the hero's journey. That this is the Wikipedia, the graph of it. Call to adventure. There's supernatural aid that comes, and there's a threshold which you have to then go through your transformation. I think that's what you're referring to just now. This descent. Yes. It's drawn as this cyclic transformation that you find various helpers and a mentor, have challenges and temptations, and go into the abyss where there's a death and rebirth, transformed, atone, and the return, which in this version of things is actually a gift of the goddess, which is sort of interesting. And you could say, yes, in maybe in Tolkien's version of these things, Galadriel previously had that sort of goddess role because she gives the fellowship gifts after they've gone through Moria, emerged after the battle with the Balrog without Gandalf, and they go into Lorien, and she gives them wisdom that then helps guide them further along, and they cycle through, I suppose. That claim of the archetypal is became famous out of Joseph Campbell's study of mythologies. The hero in all of these mythologies goes through this kind of transformation. This has, of course, been made very popular by, Jordan Peterson, who likes quoting this particular cyclic variant. And what you're saying is it's frustrating because the women are not willing. Either the women are trying to take over this journey, or they're not willing to do it. Which is
they're not doing it though. This is the thing. They're not doing it. They're pretending to do it, but they're not doing it because that kind of heroic arc or the process, it requires a kind of submerging into the kind of horror and darkness of the underworld. Like the old Greco-Roman understanding of this I've been reading about is you're going into a place where you're facing things like the Titans, or you're facing monsters like the Greek heroes had to face. It seems like what's happening now is women are still expecting men to slay the monsters for them, but not give them the credit, but at the same time are preventing men from embarking on this process themselves without direct supervision of the women. So you get, what I'm seeing is there's this kind of schizophrenic tyranny of wanting to have the journey done for you, but not allow the men to do it for you without your supervision, which you can't really do because you don't know how to do it. You've never done it. So it's like the.
I think you need to unpack this a bit. So we've already established that there's a kind of schizophrenia in thinking that it's edgy to put Galadriel in armor in the first place.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Because in fact that's less startling in the tradition than the Amazon showrunners might want to consider it is. I mean, we have I always find more pictures than I remember to put in my in my setup. So they're modern pictures of Joan of Arc in armor. She was very, very popular, of course, throughout the 19th century in France, and statues and plays and things like that. Woman in armor is a very familiar image, thanks to Joan. So that particular quality of simply dressing her up in the masculine equipment is not. It's like we're trying to say, it's not as edgy as Amazon presumably wants to think it is. But now we have the schizophrenia of exactly which journey is who going on in what terms. Yes. Do you think women actually do want to, because in what we know from the review, Galadriel is the one that kills the cave troll, which even Gandalf had some difficulty with in Moria.
Yes. Some women do.
Some women do want men to kill the monsters for them?
Yes, they do. They do. And then others are killing monsters. But in Christendom, we made this distinction, I think.
Well, so let me give you, there's a further schizophrenia in this. I've been showing the sort of, if you Google hero's journey, this is the diagram you get the most of, right? Which the known to the unknown that we get most. And I think that's because, it's partly because that's the one that Jordan Peterson has been talking about most. We go from the known to the unknown, and the unknown takes you into the abyss. That's not actually the way Campbell described it. He had a little different version. And his was more actually tied to myths of and curiously enough, the circle goes the opposite direction from the other one. Okay. We have call to adventure, a helper, tests, more helpers, flight, and an elixir. And there are various elements in this journey that include things like, crucifixion, a sacred marriage at the base, apotheosis, father atonement, and the resurrection and return. It's clear, if you follow the journey the way Campbell described it, there's a particular hero that this journey is modeled on. Not absolutely every hero in world mythology, which is, of course, why Campbell gets roundly ridiculed by most scholars in world mythology, because, well, he kind of picked and chose to fit one particular story.
What story was that?
Oh, I don't know. Would it surprise you to learn that Joseph Campbell grew up Roman Catholic? And this fits in with our general Dragon Common Room exploration right now. The first major book that Campbell wrote was, oh my goodness, A Study of Finnegan's Wake. He was running the river. He was running the river, and his idea of a monomyth he actually got from, Finnegan's Wake. So his monomyth, we've already learned that the monomyth of Finnegan's Wake is, shall we say it all together now, Christian minstrelsy. Yes. The monomyth that Joseph Campbell wrote into his Hero with a Thousand Faces, claiming that he found it in all world mythology. I just lost my fidget toy. I'm lost. Is it fell off my lap. I'm gonna bend down and get it. I can't think without this thing in my hands. Yeah. I have to write with it, right? It's like I have to fidget with them writing. This hero's journey that Tolkien too, that Campbell is working off of, is straight up Christ. And it's very interesting that so many people have been so persuaded that it's not Christian because, Campbell went and found it in all these other myths. Well, yeah, he kind of picked and chose and rewrote those stories so that they fit the hero's journey that he wanted it to fit, which is straight up. And when I taught Hero with a Thousand Faces in one of my undergraduate classes, the students picked up on it really quickly. There's like, this isn't the story that I know from this other mythology. This is still Christian. Yeah. What I, of course, like is the further the more you try to run away, as we found with Galadriel and her armor, the more you try to run away from the real monomyth, the more you're still in it.
There's no escape.
Well, I suppose that's because it's actually true. one, maybe, but Tolkien is obviously, he knows what the myth is that he's working within. He's not going to write against it. You're not going to be able to subvert Tolkien by, I don't know, putting his main character who's female in armor, because A, he already did that, and B, that fits in the story world that he's imagining in the first place. But this heroic journey that we find are feminists, we'll say their name out loud now, the feminists trying to subvert by putting the women in the role. Well, can women go on this Christian journey?
Yes. Haven't they always done it?
Well, maybe. But this is what I mean, why do we
who was standing under the cross?
Oh, guess what? The women, right? If you're going if you're going to have Christian,
the guys bailed, by the way, for all of you young kids, you young alt-right kids that want women behind the scenes. The boys bailed.
The boys bailed. Who stood under the cross? Who was there?
Mother of our
Lord.
Magdalene.
Mary Magdalene.
A
few other Marys. There are 3 Marys under the cross there. A lot of Marys. They're all Marys. And John.
Yeah.
And John.
Who? I shouldn't hate on the boys.
Well, John stopped it there. All of the others ran away. So the absolute, this is the sort of
statistics don't lie.
all the other apostles ran away. Why did the men learn about the resurrection? I do feel like we've talked about,
that's an excellent point.
Talked about this before, but we should say it again. Why in the Gospels do the men know that the tomb is empty?
Because the apostle to the apostles, otherwise known as Mary Magdalene, decided to break curfew and run down to the tomb, disregarding the soldiers guarding the persecution with the Romans, disregarding the Pharisees. She didn't care. She ran down. She wanted to see the body of the Lord and anoint it,
along with some other women. It's not just Mary Magdalene. It's like the women go to the tomb and they're the ones who find it empty. And do you think in the Middle Ages anybody ever noticed this? Those oppressive patriarchal Middle Ages.
Didn't they have the women in scolds' bridles and they didn't teach them the scriptures, so no one knew
clearly no women ever knew that it was women who were the first to find that the tomb was empty and go tell the apostles. I mean, I love this. It's like it's worth hammering home over and over and over again. The only reason that we have Christianity is because the women went to the tomb and found it empty. The men were all hiding in the upper room. They weren't going to leave.
No. And you can't accuse us for being feminists for saying this. That's the beautiful thing about it. It's got nothing to do with feminism. This is the Christian story.
Well, and delightfully enough, the origins of Christian drama are in the 3 Marys at the tomb. It was the liturgical sort of little play, or the earliest scripts that we have from medieval liturgical manuscripts. It's like is a little drama. Like now on Good Friday we read out in parts the Passion, which I've just got a book on order right now that's about the way the Gospels themselves would have been in their entirety performed as readings, which I think is quite likely. In the medieval liturgies for the Vigil on Holy Saturday, it's the 3 Marys at the tomb who then talk to the angel. So the origin of European drama is the 3 Marys going to the tomb and finding it empty.
Isn't that fantastic? So the medieval Christians beat Jeff Bezos to it by how many?
1,000 at least. I mean, those scripts are there from around 1,000. Yes. So Amazon trying to be super duper edgy by putting women in the story in these heroic roles are 2,000 years too late.
Yep. So,
because again, we wouldn't know it if it wasn't in the Gospels. So the evangelists put it in. They make the women the witness. all of Christianity depends on the belief, the men's just like with Joan and her leading the men.
Mm-hmm.
Christianity is founded on believing the women.
Believe all women.
Or at least the Marys.
Believe the Marys.
Believe those Marys.
Isn't that fun? Isn't that interesting, though? It's almost like the woke crowd really, really, really want to be Christian again.
Isn't it lovely?
Isn't that interesting?
Isn't it wonderful? So this is now...
It's almost like they'd like a Pentecost situation and they'd like women to be in armor again. Just like the women were in the medieval Christendom.
Well, at least Joan was, and her men followed her.
Yes.
Right. This is so. Apparently, there is, however, because we don't believe that women can simply go on this hero's journey, and at least scriptwriters haven't figured this out. Dark Herald has actually found. He says, "I did not make this up. This was leaked to me by a script doctor I know." That there is a description of the feminist heroine's journey that scriptwriters are meant to follow in portraying their female leads, which the as Dark Herald is calling them, bad reboot authors for the Rings of Power seem to be following for Galadriel, and it apparently has 10 steps. I've lost track of how many there are in the hero's journey, but the first step, we have to start with: the patriarchy is real and must be treated as such. The feminist
Well, it is real.
Well,
we like it.
The feminist protagonist is oppressed by it. This is not optional. Okay, so if we're going to have the feminist story, we actually have to have the patriarchy is real. Second, she is already the key to a better world. She has all the skills she'll need inherently. She's the avatar. You just got to deal with it. Third, and Dark Herald says that this is clearly showing up in Galadriel's story. It's like early on in the portrayal, she's saying, we need to go up against whatever, and the men don't believe her. Okay, so her biggest challenge isn't defeating the antagonist, it's defeating disbelief in her. Men in particular won't believe she's amazing as she really is. Fourth, she is better than any male mentor figure. So in this sense, she can't go through the hero's journey as Campbell described it because she can't have any advice from anybody. She's going to have to woman-splain the mentor. The guidance he gives is just another example of mansplaining and must be shot down hard by her. If there's a male mentor, then he is the first man that must be defeated. Fifth, she enters a new world that forces her to prove herself. Okay, and the 6th, 7th, 8th, she sort of does this repeat. She escapes the patriarchy. She's briefly overwhelmed, then bounces back. 8th, she defeats her male oppressor. 9th, now this I find very interesting. She is now an independent woman who will never need a man, and she must continue her journey alone. Any other person in her life will hold her back. She will never love or be a wife or a mother. Those things would all hold her back. 10th, realized self-actualization. She was always a goddess and just needed to believe how awesomely amazing she always was herself.
Mm-hmm. So there's no heroism.
Well,
what you've just described to me is a heroine with absolutely no heroism. There is no sacrifice in anything that has just been described. There's no duty. She's not been responsible to anybody else except for her own ego. Her perception and the obsession over other people's perception of her overrides performance. I mean, it's just anti-masculine. Like every single point lacks any process of
well, is
earning knowledge,
anti-masculine?
Or experience.
I mean, it's there's a delightful irony in this when I read it. If you could predict where I'm going with this.
Okay.
I mean, the irritating thing seems like she has to defeat disbelief in herself. She's already the key. She's has to prove herself, and she ends up neither a wife or a mother.
Yes. Which isn't. That's not a happy ending.
Isn't?
No.
Why not?
There's no generation.
Well, okay, but you end up with...
What's the point? What's the point? Why have you gone through the whole journey if you're not going to bequeath it to the next generation?
Well, I mean, if you never love or be a wife or a mother, you never get married, you're never going to have children.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a pattern for this in our stories? Maybe. I find this amazingly ironic. It's hilarious if you start realizing it. Did Joan of Arc have children?
No. But she wasn't.
She was a saint.
Well, yes.
How? Let's just tell Joan's story. I put the wrong picture up. I think I'll put Joan back. I'll put Joan back up on. Let's tell Joan's story. The patriarchy is real. That bad king, that bad English king, he's not letting the true king become king. Okay, so kings are still in there. She's already the key to a better world. Well, Joan starts out, she's just a peasant, right? How does she end up in armor?
Yeah. Because she starts to talk with her saints.
Oh my.
She begins having visions.
Visions, eh?
Mm-hmm.
Did anybody believe? Did everybody believe her when she had these visions and conversation?
No. I thought she was quite mad.
She was totally mad. Do you remember who she said she was talking to?
From memory, I know was Saint Catherine of Sinai.
Yes. Or Saint Catherine of Alexandria, whose monastery is now at Sinai.
Yes. Saint Catherine of Alexandria, and then the other two. Oh, I can't remember. I should know this.
I did. You're failing your feminist catechism.
It's gone.
It's
gone.
Saint Michael the Archangel.
Of
right,
course.
and Saint Margaret.
Ah, yes, the one who tames the snake.
Well, it's Satan in the form of a dragon who swallows her.
Yes.
And then she's typically shown like cutting her way out of the belly of the dragon.
Yeah.
Okay. And we have
so metal.
So Margaret is known for having cut her way out of the belly of a dragon. And Catherine, you remember what Catherine is shown as? I think I blew it with my pictures again.
She's one of my favorites.
What does Catherine do?
I love Saint Catherine. She's arguing with everybody.
She's arguing with everybody all the time. Yes.
Uh-huh.
She has this wheel that she's often shown with that breaks. Yes. Right? We have fireworks. There's supposed to Catherine's wheel, right? The wheel she was going to be tortured on, but of course she just waves her hand and it breaks, snaps apart, right? And yeah, why are you saying you like Catherine?
Oh, because she just she's very clever. She was a defender of the faith and argued her way into sainthood.
Yes, because she can defeat all of the pagan philosophers that the Emperor Maxentius brings to try to best her, to talk her out of Christianity, and she can argue with absolutely all of them, and make them look foolish.
Yeah.
These ladies are sounding kind of feminist, don't you think?
Dangerously.
Uh-oh.
I thought Christian women were supposed to be very demure and in floral dresses running through wheat fields, Professor Brown.
Well, maybe some of them are. That Saint Clare of Assisi might do that, yes. But we have other saints. I mean, some who appear and apparently talk to Joan of Arc and tell her to go to the rescue of the king, and immediately everyone believes her. Wait a minute. Her biggest challenge isn't defeating the antagonist. The English, I mean, those were easy to defeat. And in fact, I mean, Joan does go in having, convince the king, the Dauphin, who's like, the prince who's not really great at being king, to believe her. Oh no, they had to subject her to a test that she's tested at Poitiers, apparently for her virginity, which includes presumably fingers. She's tested for her virginity and given a sort of quiz by the theologians at Poitiers, which she refers to in the trial with the Burgundians, that when they ask her difficult theological questions, she says, I already answered that. So Joan, just like Catherine, is able to best these theologians with her doctrinal answers, but has to, let's see, number 3 in the feminist challenge.
She was illiterate as well. Yes?
Probably.
Just yeah.
I mean, she seems to have known the prayers that a layperson would learn in Latin.
Yes.
And couldn't sign her name, so she's not able to write. But the feminist heroine's challenge is, her biggest challenge isn't defeating the antagonist, it's defeating disbelief in her. Men in particular won't believe she's as amazing as she really is. Well, Charles the Dauphin clearly didn't believe Joan to start with. He kept having her quizzed. Mm-hmm. I think maybe they found the wrong script.
They spent a lot of money on the wrong script.
They sure spent a lot of money to turn Galadriel into Joan of Arc.
Yep.
They could have just read a few saints' lives, right? She's better than any male mentor figure. I mean, Joan doesn't seem to, she does seem to have had men who supported her, as I mentioned, but and she does end badly, but I mean, you could say she ends up in heaven, so she wins in the end, and definitely
after being
burned, but never be a wife or mother. I think the feminist heroine's journey is a virgin saint.
Shocking.
I'm shocked.
Shocking. They really want to be holy. They really, really deeply want to be holy women.
I think so, in this curious way. I mean, what I find amusing about this is, of course, what we're told is the patriarchy, which we have to absolutely resist at all costs, is always trying to keep women down and forcing them to be mothers and nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
When the previous complaint against, Catholicism, at least the medieval Christianity, had been that it didn't promote motherhood, but in fact had all these stories about how you shouldn't get married and stay virginal, and that way maintain your powers, and there's a whole literature starting with Saint Jerome about women not allowing themselves to get married and becoming nuns or abbesses or whatever, but becoming women like these. And what I'm showing the people now is the Virgin Mary surrounded by a collection of these ladies, all of whom are, clearly represented regularly in the art. I ended up too many pictures. Go look on, Google or Wikipedia, and you'll find plenty of St. Catherine's and St. Margaret's and St. Agnes's. And all of these women have the same characteristics, weirdly enough, that are given in this feminist heroine's journey. Realized self-actualization. She was always a goddess. Well, these ladies know that they're all brides of Christ.
Yes. Unification with the husband of the church would be that way of translating their desire to be goddesses.
Maybe that's not enough. I mean, maybe we can't let Galadriel actually believe in the Valar. Wait, she's married. Okay, it is interesting that somehow Celeborn is not showing up at all in the synopses I've seen of these stories yet. She is already married in the Second Age.
Okay, so they've pushed the husband out of the picture.
At least the one she actually had and had children with.
I'm thinking on this too. This is an interesting thing, because then in the woke mind, the feminist rendition of a saint story, they seem to be uncomfortable with wives and mothers going on the hero's journey. So they seem to be falling into this pattern of thinking that it is only appropriate for virginal characters to be going through the process.
Yes, they're not. I mean, according to this feminist journey, you don't get to be a wife and mother, but that means that you then fall into the pattern of the virgin saints.
Yes, yes.
Who are very heroic.
So what they desperately want is for women to be nuns.
Maybe. Apparently,
Maybe.
nuns were known as warriors as well. They sing all the same psalms that the monks do and recognize themselves as sisters in arms. There's a famous or famous within my field, right? There's a whole book by Joey McNamara, which is Sisters in Arms, right? The nuns as warriors.
Well, this is interesting. So why are all of the new call them new Catholics, but converts are not seeing this when they're reacting against feminism? They seem to be very, very angry at the agenda, but they're not seeing I mean, I haven't seen it. Many discussions amongst young Christian men about the role of women in the church like this. They're not looking at it.
Well, you're following those more closely than I am. Can you tell me more about those?
Well, I'm thinking of a few examples. So there is a push against the feminist agenda to get women to reframe their thinking from wanting to be feminists to wanting to be wives and mothers again.
Right.
Everybody wants women to give up the struggle for equality with men and then kind of return to traditional roles, return to the home, return childbearing, child rearing, etc. But there seems to be no discussion on women that are not suited to that role spiritually and who would be better placed in a monastic role. There seems to be no discussion amongst the Catholics that I see on the internet when they're talking to women that they may in fact be talking to somebody who was better suited to life as a nun or life as a warrior in the frame of the church.
Right.
Which I find very interesting because a lot of people that have grown up in a non-Catholic environment or have grown up in the West in general, the modern West, have grown up not even knowing monasticism was a possibility for them.
Right.
So a lot of these women that have rushed into the woke agenda, rushed into wokeism, seem to be fulfilling an urge that would be better used if they had applied it by serving God in that kind of vocation. But the young Catholic men that are talking about women on the internet never seem to be having this kind of discussion. It's always, you have to become wives and mothers. And clearly this is not the destiny of all Christian women.
Well, we've been trying to do in talking about this is showing, well, one, I believe in this monomyth in the sense that Joyce was trying to show in Finnegan's Wake, and which Campbell tried to pretend he wasn't doing, but he actually was, that there is one great story that we're living, and it is creation and redemption. And so, I don't think it's accidental that when you behave heroically, you fall into the Christ story. I mean, the interesting thing about the Virgin Saints is, of course, they are women imitating Christ. They are playing the same kind of role that the male confessors and martyrs do, and that there's stories told of these women. They're heroically resisting marriage, which in feminist scholarship has always been a sort of problem. It's like the only way they could be heroic is to resist marriage. So, well, you just told me that in the feminine heroine's journey, she will never be a wife or a mother. She has no domestic role. So which is it? Do you like that or not? But this is what I also find interesting about Tolkien. He couldn't write a different story because he knew the truth of the great fairy story, as he would think it. So everything that he wrote fit into it. And I'm finding it ironic, of course, that Amazon, even as it's trying to do something which it feels like is updating and subverting, and I don't know whether they think it's subverting. I think they want to make this, property profitable and beautiful and appealing and things like that. But they think they need to fix it in order to make it more relevant to now. I mean, it would be ironic if in making it more relevant to now, they make it more medieval, in fact, but probably not in the ways that they know most of the time, because most Christians, I mean, the general thing I find is most Christians don't know enough medieval history, and they don't know enough of the layers of the tradition to realize, insofar as you are, behaving with virtue and skill, you're going to be in this story. Now, I'm wandering. I think your particular criticism of the feminist heroine's journey is they don't seem to be put through any actual trial, that they don't actually.
Well, Joan was put through multiple trials on her way to becoming a saint.
Right.
This is the thing. It's not a case of complaining your way to sainthood. Joan was persecuted by her own side, as well as fighting an enemy side, and then eventually being burned for heresy.
Right.
So she didn't have a lot of friends. There were no women around her saying, "Yes, Queen, slay!" Like nothing.
Well, she did have Christine de Pizan. Christine de Pizan wrote a lovely poem about Joan before Joan died. So it was like when Joan's still alive in 1429.
One. She had one.
Well, I mean, Christine is the greatest female writer of the period. So, that's not nothing.
Okay. That's not nothing.
It's not nothing.
Okay. But it still proves my point. There was no solidarity. There was no, kind of social clique which she was protected by.
That's true.
She had her saints. That they were her true protection throughout her journey. And the modern feminist desire to, have women in armor seems to forget that the process of becoming monastic, being a nun, is being cloistered. You're essentially taking on a kind of isolation, even if you're in a community of other nuns, because you're removing yourself from the external community. Whereas I don't think that women understand that process, that there is a kind of like isolation, and also the trials that you have to go through on a hero's journey would mean that you're going to suffer. There will be genuine suffering in there, but most women don't want suffering. They'll run in the opposite direction. They want comfort.
Well,
so
this is what we wanted to try to say, is like if we'd actually plot a better heroine's journey,
yes,
for Galadriel or ourselves, given that the men are supposed to be going on this hero's journey and testing them. I find interesting that in the Campbell hero's journey, marriage doesn't, I mean, he gets the gift of the goddess or whatever, but you don't end up being a father. So it's incomplete in those terms. Would the heroine's journey in fact look any different from the hero's journey if we were to write a more compelling one? And why is it so hard for women to have that? Or is that it's okay, there's options. Women don't want it. They actually mainly want romance novels, because that's the which we've already talked about. Christ the Lover Knight, we got that one for you. Yep. That So in fact, most women don't want to be Galadriel in armor, and that is a fantasy of somebody, but maybe not the actual audience that they think they're appealing to. Okay, that's one. Another is women like seeing other women in armor, but not themselves. I'm not sure about that.
Well, it's kind of like having a patroness, isn't it?
Right, and then we're back to your Little Mermaid problem of women being angry that they see a character whom they identified with. She's a mermaid who can't speak and feels knives when she walks all the time because the man that she falls in love with doesn't in fact love her. And in the Hans Christian Andersen story, he marries somebody else. Really? That's your ideal? Oh, she's a, we were all mermaids when we were 10 in the swimming pool, and therefore, you're kind of blotting out the extra bit of the rest of the story.
Well, that's the Disneyfication, though, isn't it? What you've just described is that they've taken away the tragedy and they've implanted romance, and maybe that's the key to all of this: is that the hero's journey is full of tragedies, but women actually just want romance stories. They don't want to face horror and tragedy. They want romance. They want happy endings. Maybe that's the problem.
I don't know. Do we have any ladies still watching? Are Casey and Mel still watching? Ladies, what do you want in your stories? Mel is making... Casey's saying church militant, base spiritual warrior nuns. That's good. Make habits great again. Mel saying Masonic government censorship of the religious, erasing Mary. I don't know. We'll do another episode on that. They don't use your own eyes. They believe all the evil one's lies. Return to the cell, the tension of solitude, their gravitation. This is Joycean, Mel. You need to give us full sentences. The thing is, I actually like romance, and I've certainly the Return of the King. I'm upset that, well, one, I think in the movie version of Lord of the Rings, the Arwen character is insufferable and awful, and I don't like her, because she keeps getting in the way, and Aragorn should get to win her as his husband, as his bride properly, rather than she interfering all the time. What I don't understand, and this is the primary claim that I hear women making, is like the complaint that we heard against Aurora Borealis from one of its reviewers, is I want to see the claim. I want to see female characters with whom I can identify. And I'm like, what? If there's a female character with whom I identify, for example, Harriet in the Lord Peter Wimsey stories, I'm going to dislike her because she's in the way of the person. It's like Harriet gets to have Lord Peter. He's a fictional character. Harriet gets to have Lord Peter and not me. I don't want him to marry her. Although it was clear Dorothy Sayers wrote Harriet as herself, and she wrote... Okay, so I find this a very interesting sort of premise, that what women want most is heroic characters that they can put themselves in the place of. I don't understand that as a story appeal. I like watching stories about men who do heroic things. Yes. And maybe imagining they do it for me, but then if you've got an actual female character in there he's doing it for, you want her to be a cipher so that she doesn't overwrite your own fantasies. Kind of like Christ. Yeah.
Well, that's it. They're not having someone else slay the dragon for them. They're wanting to be the dragon slayer.
But Margaret did that, sort of.
She did. But only after Christ had done it for her. I think maybe this is the difference with the saints too. With all Christians, we're told, there's no male or female in Christ, but it's that I can do all things through Christ who lives in me. It's not that they're doing it without Christ. Independent, strong females. These are women who are icons of him. Therefore, it's him. He's the prototype behind the saint. So even in that sense, it's still Christ. Maybe. I don't know.
Well, what I'm showing now is an image of Christ in Majesty over the Virgin holding the Grail. In this lovely Romanesque Spanish fresco. Well, there quite simply we get to, of course, the fundamental problem is, do people want to serve Christ or not?
Mm-hmm.
And it's ironic that, of course, the whole point of the Rings of Power is to defeat Sauron, who is the lieutenant of Satan.
Mm-hmm.
Unless we're going to make... then, if there apparently are seemingly hints that Galadriel's going to, be enticed by bad boy Sauron, who's incarnate in this version of the story. And that would, of course, be edgy and apparently appealing.
Why do they need to do that?
Indeed.
I'm thinking.
Well, think.
Well, that's kind of a fundamental test for women. As a monastic, to reject marriage, that heroic act of rejecting marriage and retaining virginity. So there's a rejection of men, just flat out, except for Christ. But also women have to go through their own training in and test of virtue, in that they have to reject the bad boys that will ruin them, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's kind of the most fundamental test for women, because it's the determiner of destiny for a woman's life as a wife and mother. So maybe that makes sense in the, people are looking to work out their own struggle in the narrative, in the Amazon narrative. So Amazon says, okay, well, we'll put Galadriel in the same position as the majority of women, which is to have this temptation. But then they've already erased her husband, so it's not genuine.
I mean, it would be more interesting if they were making her, a potential adulteress. They've forgotten that she's married.
Yeah. Whoops.
We'll make Sauron the fatal attraction. How's that? That's fairly straightforward.
No, my problem with it now is, in general, everyone is angry about the color changes of the characters, and not so much understanding the meaning behind the story itself, because all people can play a saint. There's no rage if somebody puts on armor and says, okay, I'm going to play Joan of Arc today. People don't seem to mind so much, because there seems to be this acknowledgement that it's a worthwhile thing, and it's a good thing to want to emulate the saints. Therefore, no one really minds if you're pretending to be Joan of Arc for a day. There's not the same outrage. There seems to be this very, very loud protest from everyone for the same thing happening to a non-sacred story.
Well, the irony is, it's like, we need female superheroes. Okay, fine, you've got some in this tradition who you don't count as having the powers that you wish they had, even though they have the same powers that the men do. I'm entertained that we've gotten to this sort of now what do we do place, which I say is, I mean, we're wrestling with the problem that the huge challenge that men and women constantly have is, indeed, how do we... So I've never liked the Virgin Saints, because I did want to be married. I did want to have a family. I mean, what's interesting about the medieval monastic tradition is, in order to recruit women to become nuns, you had to write things like, Holy Maidenhead, which is a treatise basically telling about all the woes that you'll have if you have children. That it in fact took Saint Jerome, who I don't think was a very nice person, sorry, a fair degree of effort to convince the matrons of Rome that they don't want to have children, and that it is talking women out of wanting families in the longer tradition had actually been the harder call. So that we end up now with a claim that you're supposed to, as a woman, want to be this powerful, independent character. But as we've seen, most women end up kind of miserable if they don't have those relationships that you're apparently not supposed to want. I'm not even, I can't figure out who actually wants any of this stuff. It's like, why? I mean, if Amazon may, lose out because in fact what women, want to watch is a happy
Twilight.
ending. Yes. Want the romance and the marriage.
Yep.
Who in fact has been trying to tell us that we didn't?
The church fathers.
Oh, wait. No, wait. Now I'm confused.
Well, it wasn't appropriate in pagan society to reject marriage because it was statecraft. It was marriage as statecraft, correct?
Well, by the time Jerome's doing it, they're mainly Christian in Rome. It's the upper class thing. Although he's taking it too far and talking women out of marriage in a context in which the Roman family still wanted to have children. It's complicated in the 4th century. But in the 14th century, even treatises trying to convince women that they want to be nuns and stay virginal have to, pull out all the stops and talking about how awful it is to have all these babies.
Well, this is interesting. So it's the complete opposite of the meme then, of the no eggs.
Yes.
That everyone's screaming at women on the internet saying, no eggs, no eggs. But this was kind of St. Jerome's ideal state.
Yep.
There's all these women who have, hit their expiry and can just focus on the things of the next life.
Yep.
Instead of on motherhood and children.
Yep.
That's fascinating.
Well, I mean, this is the irony of Christianity. If it actually lived out perfectly, there wouldn't be any. Everybody would be virginal and have no sex and have no families because we're all focusing on the heavenly.
So this maybe is the issue then. I mean, at least for me with the female characters, is that they're not being women, that is, are not being shown that this instinct to remain unattached to men can be redirected to a holy vocation, and instead they're being abused by Christians who should know about the tradition of the church that encouraged this at a particular time and gave them a purpose in that rejection of the feminine role behind the sink.
Yes, well, the irony of it is that the pounding on saying you should have this domestic role is Protestant.
Aha.
And so there was a very interesting, I feel like we've said this before, now I'll just repeat it, but there's a very interesting scene in Black Widow where the character, the father figure returned is saying, is it the time of the month for you, something? And Scarlett Johansson character, or no, maybe her sister character, says, no, I can't. They gave me a hysterectomy. I mean, and not so in certain terms, like they ripped it out, yank, 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 snip, 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 no eggs, so that she could be the assassin that she is. And it's like which has some reality in the way the Soviets treated their female athletes, for example. giving them hormones, making them masculine. The sort of inversions and flipping and flopping and everything that's going on between what we've already talked about with the gender slipperiness of the soul in relation to God, and the masculinization of women so that they could be nuns. It's so interesting that the edginess, it's like the edginess of the woke is rediscovering the powers of the celibate accidentally.
Yeah. I'm just thinking of the zipper tits, the girls that are trying to sorry, not clean speech, but it's a hilarious term. But they're they're doing the same thing.
Yes.
It's a kind of public profession of
renouncing their femininity,
renouncing their femininity, and it's probably the surgical equivalent to donning a habit. So we're dealing with a religious war. We're not dealing with a political war.
Right. Yes.
So this is where the freak out over the alt-right appropriation of Tolkien is quite hilarious, because actually it's got nothing to do with right or left. It's got nothing to do with politics whatsoever. It's completely a religious war.
Yes.
Between Catholics and the whatever version of religion we're dealing with right now, which is called wokeism.
Well, appropriately enough, and I'm wondering how far they're going to go with this in the Rings of Power, what Sauron convinces the Númenóreans to do is practice human sacrifice.
Yes.
In order to achieve what they hope is going to be immortality. So the interesting thing is the evil continues. It's still in the same monomyth, still in the same story. I think Campbell was actually quite limited in his hero's journey understanding, and it's as much as I enjoy every so often reading some Campbell, he was less skilled than Joyce or Tolkien at trying to rewrite the myths into a sort of compelling story form. And so ironically, I think one of the unfortunate things that's happened in the script writing stuff is they all took whatever that hero's journey was as their template, their story template, without understanding, as Tolkien and Joyce clearly did, the deep roots underneath it in Christ's story, which maybe this is the simplest version of what's going on, is insofar as they're writing without true biblical knowledge, without true, not just doctrinal but practical knowledge of what it's like to try to live within this liturgical and moral tradition. They're just making, as like I said, I've already said it, they make the stories boring because they don't give you the actual deep tests that God actually gives us.
So it's the lack of trial that makes it useless.
Yes. Well, I mean, they're giving Galadriel like over the top trials that are too easy to accomplish. But
well, the definition of a trial is the test to see if something's good or bad or not, or something's weak or strong or not, so maybe this is the problem, is that they're not real trials because there's no potential for failure.
Well, and then we find out the necessity of free will in order for God to give us a proper
Our
who knows what
friend is not going to be happy.
Oh my my Calvin. Well, I'm a Calvin. Me deep Calvinist. I mean, Tolkien was as well, because the thing that I dislike most in Jackson's scripts is the way in which he misunderstands the issue of free will and choice and the decisions that the characters are actually making. And I'm guessing from the reviews that I'm reading of the Rings of Power that Galadriel doesn't seem to be having to make any decisions. She's just sort of having to rouse people by being upset. Darkhold keeps calling her the Karen. She knows the right decision, and people just don't believe her, and so she has to berate them for not behaving the way she wants, which just turns her into a a nasty teacher trying to run a classroom rather than someone facing her own true challenges.
So that's the difference then. It's the decision. So they're writing, this is hilarious, they're writing feminist heroines that actually don't have agency. That's hilarious.
I think that's wow. What we were there. Yes, they have no agency.
What a waste of money.
They have no true agency.
We've got no agency.
I'm and it only took us nearly 2 hours to get to that point. That's what's irritating about her.
Yep. There's no choice. There's no red pill, blue pill. There's no what if she doesn't make this correct decision, or what happens if she makes the wrong decision? That's why they're irritating.
They're irritating because they have no true agency.
And that's why women irritate me when they go along with these particular characters. Because women are not willing to admit that in order to be truly heroic, you need to have agency, or at least you need to, acknowledge that that's a part of being a hero. There's choice. Men choose to be heroes or not. Galadriel in armor doesn't. She just is.
I think that's it. I'm very happy with this realization, and recognizing that is in fact the thing that bothered me, and particularly in Jackson's portrayal of Aragorn, that Aragorn, in order to become king, has to choose in situations where he doesn't know what the right choice is. He can't even be sure himself that he's choosing, and particularly when they're trying to figure out whether to go with Sam and Frodo or with go after Merry and Pippin, because they don't know whether Merry and Pippin are still alive, but they're supposed to be with Sam and Frodo in the sense of helping them get the ring to Mordor. And he has to choose, and he's not sure whether he's made the right choice. And that is completely lost in the scene in the movies, because he just says, oh, they have their way to go and we have ours. And that is the real difficulty. The real problem is the lack of that crisis of choosing.
Well, isn't that interesting that all the women now want my body, my choice?
And no choice, in fact.
Yep. They don't want to make the choice. They want to make an anti-choice. Fuck.
Yes.
Sorry.
No, I think this is good. And of course, we say that Mary chose. This is the entire mystery of the incarnation, as medieval Christians understood it, is that God sends the angel to Mary to say, you found favor with God, and Mary has to give her consent. That's the 12th century meditation Bernard of Clairvaux makes famous, but is there in the meditations on what Mary suffers under the cross. She said yes. And when she said yes, she knew that was coming too. That she's given understanding, and Simeon points out to her when she presents Christ in the temple to be circumcised, that a sword will pierce through your own heart as well. That through that and it's like out of many hearts will be revealed. I should know that phrase perfectly, but I'm forgetting it because I'm so stunned at this. This is the realization that choice. And the problem with the feminist heroine journey, as the script doctor is saying, is that there's literally no choices, which is, of course, what the romance is always about, as Jane Austen understood, that the women have to know which one to choose, which man to, in fact, accept or reject.
Yeah, you go for Wiggum. He ruins your life.
Yep.
You go for Darcy. You argue a lot. It's like, but that's what it is.
But there's a real choice. Yeah,
there is a choice.
Well, I think that's a good place to have gotten to. A very good place to have gotten to. Let's see if the ladies have any more comments.
Yep.
Casey says, anti-choice is a good word. They seek to reverse creation. Yes. Mel says, patriarchy means there is a matriarchy. Well, that too as well. Well, I think this is a very good place to have gotten to.
Mel.
Yes, this is a very good place to have gotten to. Wrestled through it. Not all of the places that we thought were the problems, because, in fact, we'll put Galadriel back up with her armor. Not that she's wearing armor, not that she has these battles, but in fact that we can't see her beset with a real dilemma at any point, and therefore no actual choice to make. Should we leave them with that thought for now?
Yes. I thought of a phrase to leave off on that.
Okay, what's the phrase?
For our feminists who really want to be saints. But instead of my body, my choice, it should be my icon, my choice. Because we're icons in making. But there is a choice involved in it. So, yeah.
Galadriel does need to choose a Iluvatar. Not Morgoth. And unless there's a real choice there, it's just Mary suing it through the whole thing. Okay, well, Galadriel's journey, we've solved it.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Do we have a topic for next time yet? We'll tell you in the social media what the topic is coming up. Thank you for joining us.